are in for a treat, because we have the screenwriter of the first 2 original Ninja Turtle movies, and I'm not going to waste any time. Please put your hands together for the one and only Todd Langen.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all 25 of you making yourself sound like 300. That's very nice of you. Before I sit down on the couch here, I want to introduce the true star of this particular panel. Some of you already know about this, some of you don't. You're looking at a guy wearing what is probably the most famous item in this room. This is not just a turtle jacket. This is the original film crew jacket from the very first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie. There were 2 varieties. I have both. The first is a Letterman type jacket. Black cloth, leather sleeves, that sort of thing. But since it's July in Corpus Christi, I left that one at home. Besides, does anything scream the 90s more than denim on denim? Okay? But here's the part you really need to see. Get your oohs and ahs ready, okay? Here we go.
Ooh.
I love it when they play along. Let's get Corpus Christi. All right, now we can sit down.
Well, Mr. Langen, it is an honor to have you here. I am unabashedly a Ninja Turtle guy. I grew up on the movies, and
this is a good start.
Yes, like it is an honor to have you here, and yeah, it's a lot of our childhood. The Ninja Turtles have almost resurged in popularity with the figures, with new books, new writings, new movies coming out. I just want to let you go and like just talk about the experience of being part of such an iconic film so many years later.
Well, it's a rare thing. I've talked about this in the past, but any type of entertainment endeavor, especially scripted endeavor, is like a gigantic funnel, okay? At the top you have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of scripts being written, okay, which never see the light of day. They don't even get read, okay? Then you have, as the funnel narrows, you get the scripts that are actually read by people in authority. Then you have a very, very smaller part of the funnel where a certain number of scripts are sold and actually make money, but never get produced. And then when you get down to the tippy tip of the funnel, you get scripts that have actually been sold and produced. It's like, 1,000 to 1 ratio. And then beyond that, you have the microscopic opening at the very tip of the funnel, which is a movie like this one, which is called, in the business, an evergreen. It's the kind of movie that it's luck to be involved with something like this, because here we are, it's 35 years later. I'm sitting up on a stage, with a mic. Can you tell I'm a writer, by the way, with my mic technique? Talking to a group of people who still want to talk about the picture. Just it doesn't happen. It's just, there's luck and serendipity involved. And actually, I'd like to tell a story about, because I'm often asked, how it is I, a former aerospace engineer, came to actually be the person selected to write this movie. So if I may, I'll tell that story. It's a tale of serendipity. I'm going to teach you an SAT-worthy word here since I'm a writer. It means something that is not necessarily planned, but comes about because of circumstance and luck and just being in the right place at the right time, okay? So it begins, as I said, with, by the way, if you're going to ask me the question, the best way to become a screenwriter, here's my answer to you. Go to a top engineering school in the country, in my case, a university, get yourself not 1 but 2 degrees in aerospace engineering, so that'll get you out to Los Angeles. So you're working for a big aerospace corporation, and then decide, you know what? No, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Start writing after work for the next 3 years solid until you finally break into, that's how you become a screenwriter, just in case you're in, at least that's how I did, okay? So I was working at a big aerospace corporation in Los Angeles, and as new hires, I don't know if you ever worked for a big conglomerate type company, you really don't do too much in the first 2 weeks. They just want you to get used to being in the work environment, learn how to use the copy machine, that sort of thing. So a bunch of us new hires, all engineers, were sitting in, I think it was my office one day after lunch, and somebody raised one of those book of 1,000 questions sort of questions, which was simply, without regard to money or anything else or possibility, if you could choose to do anything you wanted to do in life, what would it be? And to my great surprise, two things. One, not a single person in that room who was a newly minted engineer said, oh, engineering. I want to be an engineering for the rest of my life. One guy said he wanted to play the saxophone. Another guy said he wanted to race boats, which I didn't even know was a thing that you could do for a living. And I'm embarrassed to say because, you know, I was supposedly a guy who could think rationally, but I realized that, yeah, let me think about this. If I could spend the next 50 years of my life becoming the head of this huge multinational aerospace corporation, the head of NASA, for that matter, who I worked with in those early years, is that what I want to do the next 50 years of my life? And the answer was, somewhat surprisingly, it was no. So that very evening, 2 weeks after graduating from college and starting that job, I did start to write after work every night and taught myself over the course of the next 3 years how to write a script, okay? So that's how that first transition occurred. More germanely to this discussion, how the Turtles came about was thusly, okay? So, the Writers Guild of America, you may be aware, is the union of screenwriters in Hollywood, best known for going out on strikes and screwing up the business, as they did this past year. Well, you can't really become a member of the Writers Guild until you sell a script, but you can't sell a script unless you remember the right. It's a catch-22, so it's a difficult thing to do. For years, I dreamed of getting into the Writers Guild. I would read the minutes of the business meetings, the most dry financial sort of information, just because I wanted a connection to them. But I did finally get over that hump with a sitcom you've never heard of before called The Pursuit of Happiness. It lasted for 6 episodes on Fox. It has long been forgotten, but it was my entry into the Writers Guild. After years of wanting to be in the Writers Guild, I went through the whole induction ceremony. I finally made it in, and the very first thing we did was go out on strike for the longest period in the history of the Writers Guild, longer than the one that was just completed. It was over 6 months. This was like 2 weeks after I was inducted. As it turns out, and again because of serendipity, this turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened to me. Why? Because it was mandatory as part of the guild that you had to picket. You had to walk the picket line in front of major studios, television networks for all those months. And here it comes. I got to meet people I would have never, ever gotten to meet unless that strike had happened. One of those people, I'm going to test your movie acumen here, for all you movie lovers out there, was a man by the name of Bruce Joel Rubin. Does anybody know the name Bruce Joel Rubin? I'll give you a hint. Bruce Joel Rubin went on that year, after the strike concluded, to win the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. Does anybody know what movie it was? It was the movie Ghost, okay? I met this guy on the picket line, we became friends. We started walking the picket line together. Bruce is a much nicer man than I am, because after he got to know me, he said, hey, I'd like to read something that you've read, something I never do not ask me, okay? And so I gave him a script that I wrote during the strike. A lot of the people during the strike were writing like the most heartfelt, oh, I've always wanted to write this thing, it's like deep, you know, River's Edge drama, it's dark and edgy and blah, blah, and I just wrote a flat-out comedy just to go the other way with it. Bruce read it, he liked it, and since Ghost was being produced at Paramount Pictures at the time, he gave it to the head of the motion picture department at Paramount Studios, a woman by the name of Lindsay Duran. Another name you might be semi-familiar with. She became a producer in her own right after that. She produced my favorite costume drama of all time, the 1995 Emma Thompson version of Sense and Sensibility. Well, Lindsay Duran read my script, liked it, but didn't have anything for me at the time, okay? So she did what, this is pre-computer days, remember, she simply wrote in a Sharpie marker on the spine of my script, the name of the script, put it on a shelf behind her with 100 other scripts she kept up there. That was her filing system. That was a lot of studio heads' filing systems at the time. So now, cut to, you have the Turtle people. There was an existing script. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But they were desperate to get another script written, okay? So the cry went out throughout the land. Need a guy who can write really, really fast, really, really cheap, okay? So they called agents, they called agencies, they called networks, they called studios, they called everybody. Who can we get? Who can we get? Who can we get? Eventually, one of those Turtle producers called Lindsay Duran, head of the motion picture department at Paramount Studios, and said, we need a guy fast, we need a guy cheap, this is the movie, do you know anybody? And she literally reached behind her, took my script off her shelf and said, this guy. And that's how I came to write the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. That was what set it off. Now, what I like to add to the story, again, for any of you people, maybe you're just curious, maybe you're actually considering a career in script. What's the one thing missing from the story about how you get a job in Hollywood, which wasn't mentioned anywhere in this story? Anybody? Does anybody have any idea? The one thing you're always told you need when you're starting out in Hollywood, the one thing every beginning writer and actor wants desperately when they're starting out, had nothing to do with the story. I'm talking about an agent. There was no agent involved in this process. It was all serendipitous event after event that just fell in line and eventually led in a path to me, okay? And this is a lesson to you, maybe not just for Hollywood, but you always have to be the biggest proponent of yourself. It never ends. You always think, well, once I sell my first script, I'm an agent, then somebody else will get my jobs. No, that's not the way it works. Even for the most higher up people, you always have to be out there stumping for yourself. Agents don't want to find jobs for you. That's the hardest job they do. They want to close deals. They want to negotiate deals. That's what they really want to do. Find a person a job, that's a lot more difficult. So there's a lesson in there somewhere about agents and agenting, but that's what led me to write the very first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie. I'm going to follow it up. Do you need to be here?
I like having the front row seat, so I'm staying.
Another question. This is kind of like one of my favorite stories because, quite frankly, it involves a lot of this. Okay, but I'm often asked, so that first movie, you know, because everybody's dripped and they're panicking, blah, blah, blah. How long did it take you to write the very first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie? And here's what I'm going to tell you. First, I need to give you just a little bit of context, okay? So, in Hollywood, when you write a motion picture length screenplay for a major motion picture studio, which is meant for theatrical release, to write a full screenplay from start to finish, you generally get about 6 months, okay? It can be shorter, but it can also be a lot longer, depending on how many people actually get to give you notes. Producers, executives, development people, yada, 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 yada. I think easily go up to a year. All right, so that's the first bit of context. About 6 months is what you're given to write a script. The second thing is, I'm going to describe to you why they were in such a time crunch. As I mentioned, there was a pre-existing script, okay? The producers, everybody involved felt this was not a script that they could use, okay? They wanted a new script. The problem was Golden Harvest Films, the producers of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies, a Hong Kong-based production company, had already sunk a ton of money into pre-production development costs to develop the technology through the Henson Creature Shop of the turtle suits. All the, you know, radio-controlled electronics in the head to control the feet. This had never been done before. And the Henson Creature Shop was just developing it for the first time. It's tremendously expensive to do something new like that. And Golden Harvest, after seeing the first script, was starting to panic. And what they told the stateside producers, because we're a set of stateside producers too, happened to be from England, it's a multi-international conglomerate thing, was that you're gonna get us another script super quick so we can send it out to attract a distributor. A distributor will help us contribute to pre-production costs. If you cannot find us a satisfactory script in a very short amount of time, we're just gonna eat it. We're gonna shut down production. We'll eat our losses, what we've invested so far. We're not gonna make the movie. So that's on you guys. Go find a writer, get him to do it quickly, which is one of the reasons I got hired. I came from a television background, so I was used to writing quickly and cheaply because I didn't have the budget to hire a big budget writer, okay? So that was the reason there was such a time crunch. So when I finally got the job, they said, Todd, the faster you can write this movie, the better the odds of it actually getting produced. And I had just told you about that funnel. To a writer, it's much more valuable. It's a much, much more important resume item to have a produced credit than simply a sold credit. So if writing this movie quickly was going to help to accomplish that and get my very first motion picture I ever wrote for money actually produced it onto the big screen, I was going to write this sucker fast, all right? So recall, I'm coming up to the punchline. We're almost at the end of the story. 6 months on average to write a big budget motion picture screenplay. They gave me a much, much shorter timeline, which I then proceeded to decide on my own to beat. Here it is, finally. I wrote the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie in 10 days, okay? But the more remarkable, I'm gonna pat my other shoulder now. The more remarkable thing about this, I'm going to teach you a little bit of screenwriter's lingo, okay? When a script goes into production, after a writer produces a draft, there's many rewrites, usually. Right through production, even into post-production sometime. Each one of those rewritten pages gets its own color code, so they can tell when and what part of a set that set of rewrites came from. You go through pink and blue and yellow and goldenrod and green, blah, 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 blah. So by the time you're in production and shooting, you usually have a rainbow colored script. Again, because of that time crunch, we did not do that. And screenwriters have an expression. The writer's draft comes in on typewriter paper, pure white. When that script is the script that actually gets shot instead of all the rewrites that occur, it's called shooting the white pages, all right? Because of that time crunch they were in, after I delivered the script, they got the green light, they got a distributor, New Line Cinema, production went forward, there were hardly any rewrites. That 10-day script that I wrote is the script that they shot. They shot the white pages on that movie. Now I'm done bragging. Thank you for listening.
Wow. I want to make sure we have some time for questions, so we'll get to some questions here in a little bit. If you want to line up, go ahead and line up. I've always wondered, was there anything...
There's a mic right here in the center. Obviously, if you have any question, come on up and ask, and I'd love to answer it. And if I don't like your question, I'll steer it toward a story I do like, okay?
I've always wondered, was there something that, fell on the cutting room floor that was part of the original story?
Do we have 3 more hours? Because there were a lot of that. There are some major sequences that were cut from this film that, as a writer, I still lament to this day. Because obviously, there are sins of omission and commission. You can't see what's missing, but I know what's missing. And I can give you several examples, and I'm not going to. I'll give you one, so we can, keep this somewhat to time. All right? And the one I'll bring up is the very first one, because it ties into something you are familiar with. So, end of Act 1, we've had our fun. We've introduced the foot, the dilemma. We've introduced the turtles. We really haven't introduced the shredder. That occurs at the beginning of Act 2. Screenplays are broken up generally into 3 acts. Okay? The first act and the third act are about 30 pages. The second act is kind of twice as long, at about 60 pages, for a total of 120 pages. Each page representing approximately 1 minute of screen time. Okay? This would have been at the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2. So there's a shot. If you've seen the movie, I'm sure you're going to recall that shot. It is the shot that introduces the shredder. Okay? And I wrote it like this in the script, and then Steve Aaron, the director, brilliantly realize this shot. It's a long, continuous tracking shot that starts with the Shredder's shadow entering frame, long and ominous, and then the camera swoops down and starts revolving around this guy in armor, and Tatsu, his lieutenant, this bulldog-faced lieutenant, rolls back the robe to reveal the razor-sharp armor of his shoulders, etc. It's all one continuous shot, and it is beautiful. And on some level, I hate it. And the reason is, I got a call after that. I was back in North Hollywood. I was invited to stay around for production, which never happens to a writer, and I couldn't do it because I was starting my dream job on the Wonder Years in television, so I had to go back to LA. But I got a call from Terry Morse, who was the line producer. Line producer, unlike most producers on a movie or a TV show, actually do work. That's okay, I never really expect to work in Hollywood again, so I can take shots now. And I got a call in my little apartment in North Hollywood where I'd written the whole script, and Terry goes, "Man, Todd, this is Terry." He's like, good news, bad news. He's got this incredible shot. He's talking about this shot with the shredder, blah, blah, blah. And he says, but here's the thing. It kind of took all day to shoot. Like, all day. All 8 to 10 hours for that one shot. So, we couldn't shoot the scene that came after it. And now we need to sort of write a couple lines of dialogue that covers that. And I'm going like, which is my reaction to a lot of these missing scenes. So I want to describe to you what that missing scene is, and then why it would have, I think, contributed to the movie. Would have been a nice thing to have, okay? You can catch a glimpse of the beginning of it at the end of that Shredder shot, where you see a bunch of the foot soldiers rolling out this big carpet in front of the Shredder. If you really dig deep in your memory bank, you should remember that. And then just cuts to the Shredder like, you're here because the outside world rejects you. This is your family, I'm your part. It's my own dialogue, so I can't remember it sometimes. What was supposed to happen there was a sequence that was supposed to show why. Why does everybody fear the Shredder so much? Why is he considered such a badass? Why is he considered the ultimate ninja fighter warrior in all of New York City, if not the world? Why? This scene was supposed to establish that. And we did that, in the script at least, by having the Shredder punish the foot soldiers who had failed to take and steal from April in the very beginning of the movie. The foot soldiers who got caught by the cops, which is a big no-no when you're a ninja foot soldier, okay? So they roll out that carpet, and the Shredder would simply sit down on that carpet wordlessly in sort of a lotus posture, and Tatsu was going to take one of the headbands that are awarded to the foot when they finally make the ultimate level of the Foot Clan, drape it over the Shredder's shoulder blade, and then the 4 guys who had gotten caught by the cops were going to be led into the room and stand on the 4 corners of the mat, holding these big-ass ninja weapons, blades and pikes and picentos and everything you can imagine, and they are sweating buckets, okay? This is not just, there's no comedy here. These guys are nervous as hell. And what we do, and it's all that there's no dialogue in here, what we come to learn is that their job is to even just get a hold of that bandana on the Shredder's shoulder, just touch it, and they will be spared the punishment that they're gonna get, okay? So Tatsu does this thing, attack! Boom, they don't get it, they don't do the polite thing where they all attack one at a time. Boom, they're all over the Shredder with these weapons. He's sitting, he hasn't moved a muscle. And just like, series of quick cuts. You see one kid get slashed on the arm, another kid takes one on the cheek. They're all getting a little nick, a little memento of their failure, courtesy of the Shredder, and he's hardly breaking a sweat, moving a muscle, until they're all standing around, just, hurt, and it's like, okay, but their punishment is over, and the Shredder finally rises, and we see this guy barely even, breathe during this sequence, and he took out 4 trained foot soldiers with massive weapons without even hardly, lifting a little finger. That scene was meant to establish, this is why this guy is like the most feared ninja in the world. And that's the scene that got cut, because you have that massive introductory shot. And that's just one example of stuff that's missing from the picture. A lot of the men, because it explains things more. It gives you more background. It makes you answers questions that you could have in your mind about how come the turtles can defeat the Foot now where they couldn't before? That scene got cut too. So, hey, thanks for asking and bringing back that wound.
Oh man, well, you can just imagine, because when they set it up, by the way, does anyone know their shredder's name? Orokosaki, that's right.
I know it.
What about Splinter's master?
Amato Yoshi.
That was always a little harder, yeah. But yes.
Do they get harder? No.
We have a question. Please say your name and ask your question.
Hi, my name's Carmen. It's such an honor.
Speak up, speak up.
Hi, my name's Carmen. It's such a pleasure to meet you. The Ninja Turtles have been an integral part of my life. They raised me, right? I've seen it from the 80s all the way. I'm so looking forward to Ronin. Woo! But 10 days.
Did I do a good job with raising you?
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. Because the 90s, I remember going to the theaters, watching the movie in the 90s, and blown away. So when you said it took 10 days, my brain just can't compute because it was such an amazing movie. I still
Thank you.
love it.
And by the way, now that you've opened the bridge again, I'm gonna go back. I just want to tell you that was obviously professionally, here we are again, all these years later. It was one of the best things that ever happened, obviously, in my career, and I would never, ever, ever want to do that again. Because it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, it's not the same as, working out in the sun, tarring a roof or something like that. I get that. But for me, professionally, it was the hardest thing I've ever. I woke up in the morning for 10 straight days. The very first thing I did is I went to my writing desk, and I wrote it longhand. There were no computers again, and it's like, didn't even have a typewriter until I got to the final draft. I wrote that entire first script out. By the way, in longhand, I'm still waiting for the Smithsonian to call, and I haven't gotten that call yet, so put in your bids for that. But I would sit down at that time, I would take my meals there. I guess if I had a big enough, 2-liter Coke bottle, I could stay there all day, but I did take occasional bathroom breaks. But it was like 12, 14, 16 hour. I would get up in the morning, I would write straight through every blah, 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 until I went to bed at night. And I did that for 10 straight days. Now, again, I know you think, well, there's not the physicality of it. It's the mental labor. I mean, you're trying to be creative and come up with, for all those hours straight, for all those days straight, I would never, ever want to do that again, even with all the good stuff that came from that. That was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. So my question going to that is, you went from the Wonder Years, which I loved, by the way, and then you go to the Turtles. Did you talk to the creators? Did you know what the Turtles were? Did you do research? Because it was such a short span, and then 10 days later we have a script.
That's a good question. I do get asked that occasionally. The answer was, like a lot of people involved with the franchise, no, I really didn't know much about the Turtles at all. I mean, I had become aware of them because by that time they had become a merchandising phenomenon. I had seen the commercials on television. I knew about pizza and cowabunga, but I had never seen the comic books. I had never seen the cartoon show. It was all about, that's all I knew. I still have, my initial notes from when my agent first called me and said, yeah, they got this movie that they're interested in talking to you about, it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I'm going like, what? I the notes, I'm going like confused question marks, ask agent this. And until she said, kind of like the magic word, she said, yeah, and the Jim Henson Company is going to make the costumes. And I went, ding! Oh, okay. This sounds like it could be serious, like a movie that could actually get made. And I said, okay, so is this going to be like a Muppet movie? Is it you guys hand in hands? Come on, dudes. And so I was clueless. I was clueless about that. And to further answer your question about what then is used to a guy who's clueless to write a movie like this, well, when I was brought on, there were two camps. I'm not going to go into why there were, but basically there was the comic book camp, Eastman and Laird, the darker, more adult tone, and then there was the cartoon camp, which is more for the kids, more juvenile, more broad, and all that kind of stuff. The very first question I asked at the very first creative meeting we had with all the producers, Steve Barron, the director, everybody, the very first question I asked is, what is going to be the tone, T-O-N-E, of this picture? Do you want it to be like the comic books, very dark and adult, or do you want it to be like the cartoon show and just for the kids? And they looked me straight in the eye and they gave me a definitive answer. They said, yes. I said, that doesn't help me, dudes. That doesn't help me. But then I'll cut it off here. But the real answer to your question is this. Because Eastman and Laird had cut a deal unlike any in Hollywood, because the Turtles were peaking right at that time, they had story approval. Once a copyright owner sells their idea, the rights to Hollywood, that's it. They're usually out of the picture. Not Eastman and Laird. Before I could be given the green right to write a script, that 10-day script that I told you about, they had story approval. So the producers were leaning towards the dark comic book version. They told me specifically, Todd, do not watch the cartoon. Do not watch the cartoon show. They gave me a stack of comic books, you know, from the original, however many comic books it was. This is what we want you to make the movie from. Do not watch the cartoon show. To this day, I have never seen a single episode of any Ninja Turtle cartoon ever. So that's the answer to your question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, so go on, say your name and ask your question.
Speak loud, speak loud.
Hi, I'm kind of shorter, so I have to lean up. My name is Sebastian. I grew up watching the Ninja Turtles. I remember having all the toys. I think my mother still has the Raphael that I stole from my cousin. My question is, after...
No refunds, dude.
Yeah, no refunds. I think I still have it in storage. My question is, while you were filming the movie, was there anything while filming you kind of had like a, oh, I forgot to put that in, or this would have been so cool to add afterwards?
I'm not sure I caught all that too.
Was there anything that you wish you would have added that you didn't get to?
Yeah, all the sequences that were cut. Did we not just go over that? I'm thinking. No. So I thought there was plenty in the movie. This is a very layered picture. I think there were a lot of intertwining storylines, very rare for a picture that was at least in part targeted towards children, and very, very rare for a movie of this length, because it was really only 90-some minutes. It was not that long. Besides the sequences that are missing, which there are several in which I lament, I don't look back and say, there was something that I wish I had written that was so, because I wrote everything that I wanted to be in the movie. Some of those things did not make the movie, and that I too regret. But nothing I look back and say, yeah, I wish I had written more here. So, but that's the first time I've ever been asked that question, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a good one.
All righty. Oh, yeah. Got a little one here. Hi, buddy.
Okay, it's going to be a question.
Say your name and ask your question.
I'm Aiden.
I'm Matt Keaton.
What's your favorite Ninja Turtle?
That's a good question, Aiden. All right, so I have to turn a little bit into a politician here. I'm kind of like a parent, and they're kind of all like my children, so I'm not really allowed to necessarily pick like Michelangelo. And I'm going to tell you the reason, all right? A lot of people pick their favorite Ninja Turtle based on their mask color, the weapon. That's not it. If it were strictly mask color and weapon, it would be Leonardo, because I like blue and katanas. Okay? The reason it's Michelangelo, I can give you a writer's reason, okay? I come from a comedy writing background. In many ways, I consider writing the Turtle movies to be writing comedy movies, okay? So, whenever I needed to like brighten up a scene a little bit with a little bit of humor, or button a scene, which means end a scene with, you know, some comedy, Michelangelo is my go-to turtle. And the reason is because he's the most, like, you know, happy-going, rollicking, rock and roll, surf, cowabunking, party surf turtle, right? So he was my go-to turtle for that. So since Michelangelo is my favorite turtle to write for, that's why he's my favorite Ninja Turtle. Who's yours?
Leonardo.
No, that's the wrong answer. It's Michelangelo.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Cowabunga, dude. Right on.
Alrighty, state your name and what is your question?
My name's Hector.
Speak really loud.
So I probably watch the Ninja Turtles probably several times a year, but my question is,
Before you continue, you watch it several times a year?
Yeah.
Okay, two things for you. Number one, thank you. And number two, ka-ching. Now you can continue.
so Splinter, how did he get to the roof? And was this fight scene supposed to be longer, or was it supposed to be that quick?
See, I can't hear it.
Oh,
So, how did Splinter get to the roof?
right.
And was his fight sequence supposed to be longer or shorter?
Yeah.
How does Splinter get to the roof? You don't have to. There are certain things you don't have to show him. Where it's like Splinter is just like been in chains for like days and not weeks and stuff like that. It's like he's already he got away, slipped away from Casey. We can assume he can climb the staircase. Okay, so that's not a big one. We don't have to show that. Was it longer or shorter? No, but how much time do we have left? Because I have a story about the most Hollywood thing I've ever done in my entire life. Do we have time for that?
We have about 10 minutes or something.
Okay, so it'll tie into it. So it's not so much that the sequence, there is, I can tell you one thing, okay, which is kind of, I'm going to tell you two things. I'll tell you the story in a minute, but in relating to your question, first of all, no, it was not meant to be longer or shorter, at least in terms of how it was written, because Splinter was supposed to be taking care of business, boom, in one shot like that. There was not supposed to be some sort of epic, Yoda versus Emperor Palpatine, Yoda flipping through the air, none of that. It was supposed to show that Splinter stood his ground and outmaneuvered basically the Shredder, both physically and mentally. Okay, so that part was correct. There's an interesting anecdote or aside about this, however, that in Europe, and particularly in England at the time, there was a law about nunchucks. There was a problem with nunchucks and kids and nunchucks being used. It was a bad law, but the law was basically, you're not allowed to show nunchucks in a motion picture, any sort of form of entertainment, okay? I just learned this recently. I did Vienna Comic-Con last December, and somebody there told me about this, okay? So you recall that in that last sequence, Splinter takes Michelangelo's nunchucks, which he'd recovered after Michelangelo tosses them away, and he like wraps them around Shredder's bow staff, point staff, flips around, blah, 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 etc. So there's a lot of nunchuck going on there, right? So like in England, and I think most of the rest of Europe, what you have in that sequence, talk about shorter, you have the Shredder rushing Splinter. Splinter reaches down, and then the film cuts to Shredder hanging over the rooftop. And everybody's looking at the picture in all of Europe and England going, what just happened? How did they do that? How did the Shredder end up there? It was like a magic trick, and I didn't know about this until 30 plus years later. So there's an example of how it got shortened, but that's not what you're really talking about. In terms of the script, no. Now, the adjacent story, which I like to tell, which is the most Hollywood thing I've ever done in my entire life, involves that very sequence, and that's why I'll tell it. So, back in the story formulation days, before the script was even written, one of the reasons that I believe this first movie turned out much better, in my opinion, than the second movie, which I also wrote, but I have plenty of issues with. We haven't probed into that, but don't go there, girlfriend. Is because, again, that time crunch that I was talking about, instead of having multiple people who were able to give me notes, multiple producers, multiple studio executives, multiple development people, there was only one person I had to please creatively when it came to the script, and that was the director, Steve Barron, okay? So this story involves Steve Barron. Steve Barron knew how to live the good life, okay? He's an Englishman, of Irish descent. So when he was in Hollywood, Los Angeles, during the development of this movie, he had them put him up at the hottest, trendiest hotel of the time, which was called the Mondrian. The Mondrian Hotel, based on the artist named Mondrian, who does all the square, sort of like abstract art. It was the hippest, trendiest place to be, the place you went to be seen. The hip, pretty people were there. Okay, Okay, so Steve Barron was there. This will play into the story. So one day I get a call in my little apartment in North Hollywood after I turned in a series of notes, outline, treatment, or whatever, writing out how I pictured that final sequence, how Splinter would come to defeat the Shredder. And I get a call from Steve, and he says, you know, I'm having trouble seeing this. I want to hear some other suggestions. And I'm like, I don't want to, I like this, I'm pretty sure this will work. And I'm panicking in my mind. Give me a chance to meet with you. Let me explain this to you. He goes, all right, come to the Montreal. So here I am, little screenwriter Todd, with my jeans and my Michigan shirt, because I'm originally from Michigan, carrying my little plastic briefcase with me because I couldn't afford a real one. And I'm walking into the Montreal, asking where Steve Barron is. It turns out that Steve is poolside. He's lounging out by the pool, this pale Brit, on a lounge chair. And there's like, 50 people around this pool. It's like, and it's the beautiful people, It's all the tan, bronze. It's like the Baywatch before Baywatch people, Beautiful, and I'm fully clothed, and but Steve's in his chaise lounge, and that's where we're gonna have our meeting. And he says, okay, explain how this ending works, okay? And I'm looking around, and I'm not a performer, I'm a writer. I'm already nervous of being there, and people are thankfully ignoring me. They take one look at me and they realize I can't help their careers, and so they go back to, preening, or whatever it is that they're doing. And I'm trying to explain it to Steve, and still it's hard because it's words, and it's, using words for action. And at one point I feel myself losing it, like I'm gonna lose this, I don't wanna lose this. So I actually got up and acted it out for him, poolside at the Montreal, the whole thing. The Shredder screaming, yelling, heading towards Splinter, how Splinter would manipulate the nunchucks, how he would use the momentum, the forward momentum of the Shredder in a rage against him to fulcrum him and, as a fulcrum, catapult him over the rooftop and then hold him there with the nunchucks again. And I'm screaming and I'm acting and I'm doing the whole thing. And nobody is no longer not looking at Todd at the Mondrian Hotel in Los Angeles. And I'm going, if I don't die from embarrassment and this works, I'll consider it worthwhile. And Steve looks up at me, and this is how I remember it. I don't know if this is true or not, but it's like, this is really how I remember it. He just looks at me and goes, okay. And then let's move on. Then we started going on to other notes, and that's how that sequence is still in the movie. So if you like that sequence, you can thank that at the Montreal. There you go.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for Mr. Langen's going to be here all weekend long. Go by his booth. I'm sure he has 1,000 stories.
Yeah, just quickly, I'll just say that because of the niceness of the owners of the county, I'm here. Look, we can talk at my table. I will sign anything you want me to sign. I brought along script pages from the very first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. I will autograph and sign and personalize for you. We can take as many pictures afterwards as you want to. And here's the key part. There's no money exchanged at my table. Everything is free. So if you want to come see me, please come see me. Okay? And thank this man as well.
Put your hands together, Mr. Todd Langen, everyone. Thank you so much.